Hello, I am here to talk about an article I read in Psychology Today called How to Tell If You're Boring by Frank McAndrew, PhD. So Dr. Frank McAndrew. I first want to say, generally, I appreciated his article. He went into detail as to what are traits of boring people, what that might look like if you're potentially a boring person, and how we can change certain habits and behaviors to not be boring people. The reason I chose this article was I felt like boring people often get a bad reputation because sometimes boring can be linked to a person who is stable and who is steady. However, I want to talk about the traits that he talked about because it actually went into detail as to certain things that make people more boring. And there's only really one that I have an issue with as far as, I think that could be a healthy trait that people have. And so I don't want people to potentially overemphasize or potentially work on that one trait when it's actually a healthy one. And then the others, they actually coincide with trying to be a healthier human. And so let's go ahead and delve into that. So these are the traits he said were strongly associated with being boring. Number 1, not having any interest or only having very narrow ones, or perhaps only having one. Number 2, not being funny and having no sense of humor. Number 3, lacking in opinions. Number 4, complaining a lot and being negative. Number 5, talking too much and being a bad listener. And lastly, number 6, lacking creativity and ambition. So I think all of these need to make sense in context because there's always a context for different things. However, some of these are pretty clear cut. If you talk too much and you're a bad listener, that is definitely something that across the board would be helpful for you to work on. Generally speaking, a lot of people struggle to be good listeners. Not only do they struggle to be good listeners, but they struggle to be curious about the person they're talking to. So someone could tell them something and then they kind of like flatly are like, yeah. But they don't really take more of an interest and get curious about that person or that thing. That person could be perceived as a not so interesting person. And when somebody is a bad listener or they talk too much, that's pretty clearly just, I don't know about boring, but that's kind of frustrating and annoying to most people. So that might be something that's pretty clear cut. That's something to work on. Complaining a lot and being negative. That's another thing that, across the board, it is not fun to be around a person where the lens in which they look through life is always negative. That doesn't mean that they can't be a person that says, hey, sometimes this thing happens and sometimes this thing happens. And you can really tell when you're with a person where instead of seeing things for what they are or the good in things, they tend to be overcritical and seeing the bad in things and being judgmental. And I know for me too, that's really not an enjoyable conversation. I was actually having a conversation with a person the other day and I was just, talking about how much I was enjoying the weather. And their comment to me enjoying the weather was responded to with, well, it's going to rain in 2 days. And I just wanted to be like, they're not wrong, but the fact that out of all of what I was talking about and in the area where I was celebrating, the thing that they thought to respond with was when the crappy weather was going to come in. It's just one of those things where if someone does that consistently, again, every now and then we all do it, but if that's consistently how you respond in a conversation, people are not going to enjoy being in conversation with you. And in fact, you might notice that people don't have as much conversation with you. And that might also go to alongside with not being funny or having no sense of humor. I know not everybody has the gift or the talent of being witty or funny, although that is something you can develop, which is pretty interesting. And I think what's more important in this scenario is not having a sense of humor. So not being able to tell when something is funny and how to just laugh and enjoy that sometimes things are silly and sometimes, we don't have to take life so seriously. So I think what's even more important than being able to tell jokes is often just being able to laugh at jokes and just go along with jokes more so than really needing to be funny. Because again, I think that's a gift that some people have, and that's part of their essence. But if that's not you, sometimes trying to be that can actually really backfire. And then not having any interest. This may be more of a sign of you maybe not being so sure of who you are. Maybe you've always followed the status quo and you're kind of trying to find who you are, or you could be struggling with some mild depression. You could be. Or just wasn't ever fostered in going out there and figuring out cool things or just weird things that you enjoy. This is something that I think for most of us, we can really work on, and we can go out there and really experiment with things and try different things. Essentially, go create a bucket list of things you may think are interesting and try them out and figure out what you do enjoy at the end of the day. This usually has to just do with you giving yourself permission to self-explore and to not always have to go with the status quo. In fact, if we're all the same, that is kind of boring, and so it is important that you try things that are, maybe not the norm for your family system and what you grew up in. Doesn't mean you have to do them or love them, but if you go out and try different things, you may find ways in which you're different. And oftentimes those things can be very celebrated and interesting about you. It's not bad. Again, closeness is not the same, or sameness is not the same as closeness. So to be close to people, that doesn't mean we have to be the same. So go out there and be you and explore the areas in which you're different, because that will make you more interesting. The last one I want to hit on before the one I'm okay, this one I have a little bit of concern with, is lacking creativity and ambition. I think that also goes with what I just talked about with if you've never had a chance to really explore, or you've never been encouraged to do that, you may just genuinely lack motivation to go do things. Usually people have ambitions about things that they're passionate about when they feel capable and they're supported, whether externally or internally. And so really it's about working on what do you need to feel supported externally, and if not externally, internally, your own self-talk, your own voice, about going out there and doing things that you care about and living your dreams. And I think creativity can come along with that, especially if you have a curious mindset about solving problems and just digging into things. There's a lot that you can do with that. All right, so my only kind of asterisk to this article, again, I love so many things about it. I don't know that lacking in opinions is maybe a perfect way of portraying this. Now, I understand that we're all different humans and that we all get to have our opinions. And again, differences can be interesting. However, sometimes when I read this, I think of people who always share their opinions, or they're very opinionated. And while they may be more interesting, it may not always be a healthy feature. In fact, some people who don't have very strong opinions tend to be better at what we call dualistic thinking, which means that they hold space for multiple truths, that they're able to say, hey, I see it this way, and I'm going to seek to understand what you're believing and what you see as well. And perhaps this author meant, hey, at least have an opinion to start with, which I'm totally on board for. However, some people may read this and think it means that you have to have strong opinions and share your opinions and feel a certain way. And again, I'm not anti people having opinions. It's more of the ability to also hold space. And sometimes people intentionally do not share their opinions because they're trying to be more emotionally safe humans. So that's the only one that I'm like, maybe it might make people quote unquote more boring. And it also may make their lives less dramatic. And so the one caution that I would say, if you struggle with quote unquote being boring or fearing that you are boring, I'm all about you doing things that help you dig deeper into who you are and help you live life that is just exciting and energizing for you and brings out your passions, with the asterisk of don't trade your stillness and your calmness for drama. Don't add in drama to become more exciting or more interesting. If you're going to be on this journey to become more interesting, do it in ways that don't add drama to your life. And yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's really about being curious, first with ourselves and then with the world, because that's true engagement. When we can ask questions, when we can get curious, and we can learn from each other. All right, that is what I have to say about this article. Overall, major kudos, and Jenny out.